We should probably do some sort of introduction. Like, hi, everybody. I'm Patricia.
I'm Lee.
And we're weird as fuck.
Yeah, I suppose you probably should, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Because someday we might be famous. Okay. So. It's our third installment of the Vile Vortices, and this time we promise not to go on about shipwrecks. We're going to cover the last 10 of the Vile Vortices, including a little information on the North and South Pole, and wrap up the series. Then next week, tune in while we get into spooky ghost stories just in time for Halloween. Are you ready? Here we go. All right, and then there's Great Zimbabwe. So this is something they never taught us about in school. Of course, when we talk about megaliths, we hear about Egypt, which is nominally in Africa, but we don't hear about civilizations of brown people in American schools. Egypt was very much whitewashed. When you looked at even pictures of King Tut, they were never African people. They always looked very Greek. And I understand that the people of Egypt were more light-skinned, and I think that made them more palatable to Westerners as far as history. But we were always taught that people in the southern regions of Africa were fairly primitive, like mud hut dwelling, tribal, hunter-gatherer types.
That's what they say.
Well, that's what it's convenient when you're trying to build a society with the idea of our superiority over the primitive natives of another land. You have to frame it in a way that makes us look like we know what's going on. We're technologically advanced and we're bringing them with us into the future, as opposed to they had a thriving civilization and we, jackbooted our way right over the top of it. But again, that's another story to be told at another time. Right now, we're going to talk briefly about the Great Zimbabwe megaliths. So, in southern Africa, there's the ruin of a medieval stone city. It's the largest ruin in sub-Saharan Africa. This thing is massive. And it's second in size only to the Great Pyramids. It has 10-meter high and 250-meter long stone walls that surround the main complex. So to those of us in the U.S. who are used to feet and inches because for some reason we've refused to use the metric system. I don't get it.
Well, technically, like the cars and stuff are and all that kind of shit, but generally in school, yeah, it's still going.
You know what? Science uses the metric system. All we would need to do is start introducing it to children now. In a generation, it'll be standard. Have dual signs for us old people who need them. And just, anyway, it annoys me because I always have to translate everything because nobody ever taught me.
Yep.
Everybody else in the world uses the metric system. We just need to get on board. Anywho, that's my rant for today. It's not, but okay. So 10 meters high is about 33 feet. And 250 meters long is about 800 feet. So this thing was big. And I never knew it existed until I was reading this. It's not known exactly who built them or how the task was even managed. Because again, medieval sub-Saharan Africa wasn't supposed to have the technology that would allow them to do this. But like many other centers built in the area of the Vile Vortices, it was a great source of wealth and power in the region. It was one of the big players. And within the ruins, they found materials from India and from China and even from Europe. And of course, the Saudi states in there. So obviously there was a rich trade route that included the Great Zimbabwe. Yep. And yet we never learned about it. So this is one that I would really like to cover in more in depth later because I hadn't heard anything about it. The Devil Sea, also known as the Dragon Sea, like the Bermuda Triangle, only closer to China as opposed to Bermuda. And it's famous for a few really remarkable instances. So the first, and one of my favorites, was that in the 13th century, the fifth great Khan of the Mongol Empire, Kublai Khan, you may have heard of him.
Yeah.
Was intent on establishing himself as a great power in Japan. Japan had wealth, they had culture, they had access to trade that would benefit the Mongol Empire, and Kublai Khan wanted it. And so he sent in a fleet, and Japan sent back a typhoon and sank his fleet. Now, they believed that the Japanese believed that the typhoon was the work of the gods. Kublai Khan decided, no, it's just bad luck. So a couple of years later, he sent in another fleet. It was also sank by a typhoon in the Devil's Sea. At this point, Kublai Khan, being the savvy leader that he was, decided, nah, he wasn't going to go after Japan. It wasn't worth it. And this was thought to be a legend, just because it's just such an extraordinary story, that the great Khan lost 40,000 men and ships to these divine typhoons in the Devil's Sea. But recent submarine archaeology digs, I don't know what they call that when you send people into the water as opposed to just digging holes in the ground. But they found evidence of the fleet at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, with that many, they should be able to find something.
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting. So again, there was another story that happened early in the 19th century, so in the early 1800s, that several mariners reported seeing a traditional Japanese sailing vessel in the Devil's Sea. And on this vessel was a woman in white. Now, among the ghosting community, women in white are symbols of women in mourning. They're searching for something. When the ships had tried to approach this woman in white on her traditional Japanese sailing vessel, she vanished. And this wasn't just, one guy who had maybe gotten into the grog, or even a few guys. It was several. And again, in the middle of the 20th century, several fishing and military vessels in the Devil's Sea went missing without explanation. And again, middle of the 20th century, it would be around the time of Flight 19. So we didn't have the transponders and the other equipment that we have now that make us capable of finding things when they go missing.
Yeah.
But still, several fishing vessels, several military vessels, you'd think that there would be some debris or something that we could find. But poof, just off into nowhere. So in response, the Japanese government sent off a research vessel, the Kaiomaru No. 5, to study the area and determine what was the cause of the high number of losses. But the research vessel went missing too. It was later found at the bottom of the sea, all hands lost and unaccounted for.
So no emergency message, nothing. It just
went down. And the interesting thing too is that typically when you have a shipwreck like that, there's some evidence of the people that went down with it. But with the Kaiomaru, there was no hint that there were people on board. No bodies. Not a soul was accounted for. The Japanese decided that portion of the Devil's Sea was probably not safe and have declared it off limits.
Stay the fuck out.
Exactly. Y'all just sail around it. It's fine. It's where all the fish hide now. But okay, so in the Pacific Ring of Fire, just off the coast of Hawaii, is a place called Hamakulia. And here we have high instances of volcanic activity. So
like Hamakulia.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the legend has it that it's trying to. So the Hawaiian Islands are already known for extensive volcanic activity, but apparently this region is even more violent and responsible for lost ships as well, just like the Bermuda Triangle.
Tsunamis. Sometimes.
I didn't find that. The Hawaiian people did believe that the volcano did hold mystical powers, and for centuries, indigenous people reported seeing lights around the volcano. Now, of course, ancient astronaut theorists believe that this is that this is evidence that there's some sort of alien home base there, and those are ships that are flying into the caldera of the volcano to dock. And I suppose if you were an alien species who didn't need to breathe oxygen, maybe it'd be awfully hot, but okay. But
kind of weird.
Yeah, like so many other theories, there's no evidence to support that. So the extensive loss of equipment and life over the years has been attributed to what scientists call piezomagnetic effects in the area. That's magnetization of the rocks and strange electrical energy that flow throughout the region. And this would have an impact not only on, basically seeing lights, like we talked about Columbus seeing things in the sky, but also if you're whether you're using an old-fashioned compass or electronic equipment, additional electricity in the air and magnetic rocks are going to wreak havoc on those devices.
Yep.
And make it very difficult to navigate. So that falls into our, we have either advanced civilizations or disasters. So that would be disasters. In Algeria, we have advanced civilizations. So there's megaliths in Algeria as well. Megalithic structures and sophisticated cave paintings speak to an ancient civilization capable of creative thinking and building on a massive scale that should have been impossible during the time that scientists estimate that these cave paintings existed. So what's more, there also appear to be a higher than average number of aircraft that go missing in the area, including small personal craft and even passenger planes. So in 2014, they lost an Air Algeria flight in that area, and they've never found a trace of it. And in 2014, we would have had transponders.
No, definitely.
And we would have had radios, and there should have been a signal. There should have been something from the plane
radar
saying...
and everything else.
And this happened over land. So it's not like, they went down over the water and the wreckage sunk to the bottom. They just never found anything. It just poofed out of existence. There's a lot of these. There really is. I talked a lot on a couple of them, so we're running a little long for time. I'll speed it up a bit. Next is the Wallaby Fracture Zone, the Wharton Basin. So this one is near the northeast corner of the Indian Ocean, and it's the place that it's a place that has extreme seismic activity, much like Hamakulia. And it's where they believe that the Malaysian jetliner MH370 went down. And they believe it's also why we were never able to hear any sort of distress signals from it. Mm-hmm. Now, we learned later on that the transponder wasn't working because they forgot to put batteries in it.
Way to go, guys.
Yay. But even had the transponder been working, there's some argument that we wouldn't have really been able to hear that signal because of the elevated electromagnetic energy in the area, which would have interfered with those signals.
Yeah, we still should be able to fly over at the top of it and catch the signal or something.
Well, you would have thought that you'd have been able to find something, some debris, an oil slick, something.
Well, especially the one over land. It's like...
Yeah, the Air Algeria flight.
Be able to find something.
Yeah, you would have seen something, smoke in the sky, something. But nope, they never found it. So then there's the New Hebrides Trench near Fiji. This one is one of the deepest locations on the ocean floor, up to 25,000 feet deep in some areas. That's almost 5 miles.
That's deep.
That's deep. That's terrifyingly deep. It's one of the least explored places on the planet for that reason. Obviously, that's a lot of pressure on a craft that's going that far down. Up until recently, anything that you'd send that deep would be crushed by the pressure of the water. Gravity is not kind. Trust me, I know this.
Especially in water.
Especially in the water. So recently, however, a deep sea lander was dropped into the trench and was able to capture photos of unusual sea creatures. But no explanation as to why craft have gone missing in the area. No sign of aliens, sadly, which is very sad. It is really sad. Like many of the ocean-bound locations on our list, this one has become a final resting place for more than its fair share of ocean-bound vessels, including the President Coolidge. Now, this one was a 650-foot luxury liner that in 1942 was converted into a troop transport that served during World War II. For reasons that are unknown, the President Coolidge went down in the New Hebrides and was never heard from again. So like the Bermuda Triangle, like the Devil's Sea, like the area off the coast of Hamakulia, ships just seem to malfunction.
Poof.
And poof. And, sometimes we do have evidence as to where they are. But in some cases, like with Flight 19, there's nothing. It's just like they've been pulled off the planet.
Yeah. With dead bodies, I mean, something should show up, but...
Yeah, and, it makes sense why you wouldn't necessarily see, if there were just, a few crew members, you wouldn't necessarily find bodies, because the ocean is very good at taking care of that sort of thing. Sharks. Starfish are carnivores. I didn't realize that. That's kind of gross. They feed on carrion on the ocean floor. There's a lot of things to do, but in some cases you have hundreds of people that are on these ships, and with a troop transport, it would have been the same. You'd have had a very large contingent of soldiers on that ship, but nothing.
All devoured by starfish
or aliens, whatever. So last and certainly not least is one of my personal favorites that I'm going to be covering in depth later, the South Atlantic Anomaly. So the Earth's magnetic field protects us from radiation from the sun. But there's a place where the Van Allen belt, which is what we call that, drops closer to Earth than anywhere else. Not only does the anomaly impact vessels on Earth, which can impact our navigational equipment, satellites, all of that sort of thing, which makes travel in the area difficult. But the anomaly is so powerful, it impacts vessels in space as well, which I thought was
weird.
It's real cool. So in 2012, the SpaceX Dragon experienced a transient issue with its electronic systems, which they were able to resolve in time. They didn't share with us exactly what they did to resolve it. I'm assuming that it had to do something to do with the system shutdown while they were traveling in that area. That makes the most sense.
Oh, I have all kinds of redundant backup systems and all kinds of shit.
Right, but if you have an anomaly that's impacting systems in general and not just one defective system, then you're going to have an issue like the Japanese X-ray Observatory whose navigation systems were impacted so badly that they had to rely on their gyroscope, which apparently didn't work because the vessel spun itself into pieces. It shredded itself after passing through. So, and there's more. There's loads more. There's stories about the Hubble telescope experiencing issues when going through this anomaly, as well as craft on the ground experiencing issues too. And like I said, I'll cover that in more depth later. So those are the 10 Vile Vortices that exist around the equatorial regions. And I know we weren't going to talk about the North and South Pole anomalies because obviously there are no advanced civilizations currently living in those areas.
Well, that you know of, it could be covered in snow.
Well, and that's the thing.
And all kinds of shit.
And ancient astronaut theorists believe that there could be an alien civilization living under Antarctica.
Yes, they showed that. Showed something on one show that looked kind of like a pyramid or some shit. But
well, right, but geologists explained that that's simply because that portion of the mountain that's exposed is exposed to sustain and eroding winds that are making a flat plane. The rest of the so-called pyramid doesn't look like a pyramid at all. But there was a reported story about a hole in the ice that a pilot, I want to say in the 1950s, was flying over the area and saw a craft emerging from.
Yeah, I remember that one.
So I thought that was interesting. And well, well, and we do know that long, long ago, Antarctica was a more temperate area. That's beyond the shadow of a doubt. Scientists have discovered traces of plants in the area that couldn't have existed under the current situation. Obviously, there's like a mile of ice in some places. So it's possible that there was some sort of civilization. I don't know. I'm a little bit doubtful of that. And, of course, because of the extreme weather, there's going to be craft that go exploring that don't come back.
Yeah.
More often than not in previous generations, I would think. But it does bear noting that NASA is exploring the dips. So let me back up. The Earth's magnetic field goes from the pole out and around to the pole. So it's like if you were to take yarn. My grandma knitted. I don't know if your grandma knitted, but they would make balls of yarn or thread. And when my grandma was making like doilies, her doily thread, there was a hole in the middle of the spool. It wasn't on a spool. It was all soft. So imagine that the Earth is like that doily spool and you have that hole in the center and the thread is coming out around. That's kind of what the Earth's magnetic field looks like. Yes, and that dip at the poles causes extreme magnetic fluctuations. In fact, I was reading yesterday that in one area, I believe on the North Pole, there's an anomaly that causes that magnetic field to be about 200 miles thicker than it is in other areas, which is not a big deal to us here on the ground. We don't even notice it unless we're trying to navigate. But if you're actually there, then if that anomaly was at surface level, it would cause hurricane force winds that would make Sandy look like a stiff summer breeze, essentially. So
another reason to not live there.
There are a lot of reasons. It's cold.
Too goddamn cold for me.
There's no land at the North Pole. So, unless you want to live on a kayak your entire life, which, I get motion sickness, so that wouldn't be a good deal for me at all. And in Antarctica, I mean, you freeze to death peeing outside. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Okay, that just popped into my head, but
that sounds like fun.
Let's do that. Let's go to the South Pole, drop trow, and see what happens.
No.
You don't think so?
I like my thingy right where it is.
I would hope so.
No popsicles for me.
Oh, so many things I could say right now, but I won't because, well, this isn't a family show. I'm just not going to. So yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. NASA has sent up probes right now. They're actually in August of this year. They just did a report on some probes that they sent into outer space to study those magnetic phenomena, specifically the South Atlantic anomaly, so they can figure out why that weird little dip in the Earth's magnetic field causes such havoc for craft in outer space.
Well, magnetic poles always screw things up. So.
You would think so, but it's not just a matter of wreaking havoc on the navigational equipment on board. It absolutely destroys its ability to function, which is weird when you consider the craft are in outer space. They should be outside of our atmosphere.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would bother them.
You would think
flying over the top
or flying within close proximity, or trying to navigate, especially on the Earth, but craft above the planet. Anywho, that is the final end of the Vile Vortices. And I'm sorry it was so long, 3 episodes long, but I do try to keep these under 30 minutes because folks have said that they appreciate that. These are quick.
Got shit to do, man.
They got shit to do. They're going. they're navigating themselves to work and having me put them to sleep all their way. Is that what they want to do?
Hopefully not.
God, I hope not. That would be terrible.
No, I'd crash.
You're a horrible human being. But anyway, you have your moments. Anyway, that's the end. To learn more, and thank you to John from Albany, who emailed me and reminded me that I had forgotten to hit publish on the blog post. You should now be able to see all of the sources that we used in this episode. Very sorry about that. And typically those will be on our website at www.weirdasfck.com. Check it out. Send us your stories because we'd love to hear from you. And let us know what you think.
See you later.
Bye. Want to stay connected between shows? You can find us on Instagram at WeirdAsFCKPodcast, on Twitter at WeirdAsFuckPod1, on Facebook at WeirdAsFCKPodcast. Send us an email at weirdasfckkpodcast@gmail.com, or come on over to our website at www.weirdasfck.com. There you can check out our blog, pick up some merch, look over our sources, and even share your weird experiences. You might even make it on a future episode. We would love to hear from you. Until then, tune in and keep it weird.